Hi, you're watching the Relationship Resourcing Series with Sean Healy, personal change agent and relationship consultant. This is a series designed to offer support, education and insight into how do we have better quality business and personal relationships. So welcome to this particular episode called Anxiety in the Family. Where we get our ideas from, how we approach dynamics in our personal relationships and in our business relationships, very much stems from what kind of influences and role models did we see growing up in our family systems. What did we learn directly and indirectly about how to manage anxiety and how to face up to and be present with intimacy. And these things can really impact where we're going in life, the quality of experiences we have, and also the health of the kind of relationships we have overall. I certainly know people that have suffered continually throughout the course of their life, moving from one toxic relationship to another. And not because they don't desperately want to feel needed and loved and validated, but they just didn't have good role models, or they suffer from elements of immature psychology due to childhood wounding, and they just don't have the skills to be able to have better quality experiences with other human beings. Or it might be a context thing where they find that they can do really well with business relationships, but their personal relationships really struggle. So I thought I'd look at some of the elements and ways in which a family system manages anxiety. There are a number of elements, certainly more than I can cover in this particular episode, and these patterns exist in all family systems. To what degree and to what intensity and frequency tends to be determined by how much anxiety exists in the family system. If we grew up in very dysfunctional family systems, then there might have been high amounts of acute anxiety, meaning that there were moments of absolute chaos, massive, bouts of physical or verbal abuse, incidences of attending hospital because somebody had a drug or alcohol overdose, car accidents. These kinds of things are examples of acute anxiety, flash and crisis points that appear. Chronic anxiety is kind of the undercurrent, the backdrop of the family system. And if we grew up in a family system where we sort of always felt on eggshells and never really safe, then we might find that some of the patterns that I'm going to mention really played out in quite extreme ways. And so the family and ourselves, we are part of a larger system, a family system, and everybody is interconnected and adjusting and reacting of each other, and that doesn't necessarily change even though we've grown up, we've left home, and we've started our own family system over here, but we can still be very enmeshed with the original family, and still very impacted, hopefully in some really healthy and helpful ways. And then sometimes, unfortunately, there are some unhealthy ways in which we can be influenced, and we, whatever's not resolved in our family system, we often take that from the family of origin where we came from, and we drag and drop those patterns into our the family that we begin to create with somebody, and then we start to play out those sort of elements, and then unfortunately we're likely to pass that on to the next generation if we don't start addressing that. And our family of origin received those things from our grandparents. It sort of goes down the chain. Part of the family inheritance that we really didn't want and didn't ask for, but it starts by having deeper awareness of the kinds of ways in which the family goes into managing the emotional fusion and anxiety in the system, and then we can start to step out and act consciously and with choice and also this informs us of how the family system is likely to act, because all of these patterns tend to escalate the more the anxiety goes up in the family system. So what kind of patterns are we talking about? Well, one is what we would call the distancer and pursuer dynamic, and this often plays out strongly in the primary relationship, be that mum and dad, or dad and dad, mum and mum, where in order to manage a low capacity for intimacy, one partner will try to always find ways to keep distance, because they will feel suffocated if they feel too close to their partner, and the other partner will take on the enmeshing pursuer role, and so there's always this kind of gap and dance between the two. But it's recognizing, even though it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking that somehow the distancer is the criminal. Here, look at this beautiful person over here. All they want to do is connect with you and spend more time. And so if we fall into the trap of thinking that one side of the dynamic is to blame, actually they both have the same intimacy tolerance level. It's just that they're playing it out on two sides of a polarity, but they are at exactly the same level of intimacy. And the moment we realize that, we stop blaming and overly focusing on one, and we can start to address, because a distancer needs a pursuer and a pursuer needs a distancer. They would both actually implode if that gap got too close, because they haven't necessarily learned how to be truly present and intimate with one another, or we can only tolerate small moments of it before we have to go into this distancing dance again, because it's too confronting for us, and we feel safer if we keep our partner at arm's length, because of if we really got into how much they meant to us and it didn't work out, then it would be truly a devastating experience. So it's kind of an element of running a sense of psychological defense. So that one of the ways we can play this out is we can draw each other in, and then we will have some sort of conflict that pops us back out. But then before we go too far away, we suddenly reach for each other again, and then there's more conflict and we pop back out. And you might have seen that dynamic as a child, watching your parents do this distancer and pursuer dance. If that was one of the ways in which your family did that, or you watched your grandparents do that, again, it's more prevalent in some family systems than in others. But if we're not doing the distancer pursuer thing, or that's not our primary way of managing anxiety, intimacy, and closeness, then what we might do is go into what is sometimes known as reciprocal or borrowed functioning. And this is where one side becomes almost an over-functioner. They look like the together one. They've got it all going on. And in order to manage the anxiety in the system, the other person takes up the other side of the polarity and becomes the under-functioner. So you've got one person that seems to have it all going on, and then there's this other person whose life seems to be socially or psychologically or physically falling apart. This dynamic can be played out in another number of ways, and it's not meant to put one person in the one up position and in the one down. That's just a byproduct, or somebody's looks like they've got it all together and they're the over-functioner and they're holding up 3 jobs, and the under-functioner has depression and can barely get out of bed. It's not meant to do that. It's just that functioning dynamic is a byproduct of managing the anxiety in the system. Or we might find that one parent is the over-involved parent and the other parent is the under-involved. Traditionally, in some cultures, we've seen this very much. There's a gender influence through this, where in the olden days, not so long ago, and certainly still plays out now. There's still an undercurrent, absolutely. But we're looking at the idea where the woman takes the primary responsibility for the children. They become overly involved. They know everything about the child's life. They know when the next parent-teacher meeting is. They know what the child likes for breakfast. They, and the father figure becomes more and more under-involved. I'm doing my role at work. And so we can have this under-involved, over-involved dynamic that plays out in the certainly in the parenting approach to children. Or we can have the over-emotive person and the under-emotive. One person is highly reactive, and the other person tends to kind of completely underreact. Or I've certainly met couples where you've got an over-talker and an under-talker. And again, this looks like it's a way of dodging intimacy. It's a way of kind of balancing the anxiety in a family system. And these patterns can really get in the way of us really being present, excuse me, and having healthy or healthier dynamics. So that when we're looking at these elements and these traps, so we're not taking those on to the next generation and playing those out, because they can be extremely toxic and painful, and really do cause some real challenges in the family system. And if we're not doing... So, as I say, the first thing is we can do the distancer and pursuer style of approach, or we can do this kind of over-functioning, under-functioning, over-emotive, under-emotive dynamic, these functioning dynamics. Or if we're not doing those, maybe we can go into some form of projection. So that what happens sometimes, if there's gaps in the intimacy between two parents, they might suddenly turn their attention and focus to one or a few of the children in the family system, so that one child can become the product of intensely negative overfocus, or you can become the product of intensely overly positive focus. Both are very anxiety building for children, and it's a real undercurrent. It's not even necessarily anything that's said, but we can take the focus off ourselves by obsessing, overly focusing, and overly worrying about children. And worrying, especially if it continues on to when the child becomes an adult, is a sign of emotional enmeshment. We're not trusting people to begin to be able to grow into their own individuality, into their own sense of independence. I'm unable to relinquish and honor your individuality because it threatens my sense of enmeshed togetherness. But that's probably another episode. It's a whole different kind of topic there. But again, it's worthwhile noting that we can become overly focused and project our stress, worry, anxiety, or hopes of success unfairly onto a child, and we can over-identify with the success of that child or the failures of that child. And again, it's a way that we can take the spotlight off ourselves. I manage my own anxiety then by trying to manage you, rather than looking at, well, what does this evoke for me? And instead of trying to correct and change your behavior, I've got to focus on what this brings up for me, and I've got to manage myself. And there are a number of ways, apart from recognizing the ways in which we manage anxiety and intimacy in our family system. Recognition certainly helps. But the other key thing that you can do to kind of start to bust this dynamic is manage your own emotional reactivity in your family system. If you find you're getting worked up, or you're starting to suck up the anxiety of other family members, the first thing you can do, and the most helpful thing you can do for your family system, is get control of yourself. Reduce your own emotional reactivity. That will allow more clarity of thinking. You can start to formulate a strategy rather than getting sucked into this emotional overreactivity. And this is, when we're reacting rather than responding, we're likely to add and escalate the sense of anxiety within our family system, not help it. So we don't serve our family system by getting sucked into family feelings. where if one person is upset and devastated about something, it doesn't necessarily help us to join them in that space. That doesn't mean that we aren't truly loving and concerned and there for them. We just don't need to suck their stuff up to do that. We'll help far better if we can stay compassionately detached and support and not rush in and try to solve everything for them, because in the end, inadvertently that can cripple them long term. And if I'm uncomfortable watching a family member being uncomfortable, the first thing I need to do is manage my uncomfortableness, not go, I can't stand to see you uncomfortable, stop that, or change what you're doing there so I can feel better. Again, it comes back to learning ways in which we manage our own emotional reactivity, because that's how we can help our family system. If we notice that the chronic anxiety in particular is going up, then the first thing we can do is drop our inner, we can calm ourselves down, bring ourselves down, and not buy into the hooks of the family that are flying around us. And then hopefully our state of calm starts to reflect out into the system and starts to help others come down too. And at the end of the day, especially with adults, we're not responsible for what they're doing. But I really am. We can certainly help, but I'm most responsible for my own reactions and adjusting them first before I do anything else. So I hope this has been, it's a really deep and complex area, but I hope it just gives you a quick element and food for thought. But it really becomes, it's a really powerful skill to be able to hold on to our own emotionality whilst we're with the people that are really precious to us. It's very easy to get sucked in, but that does not necessarily help our family system or our loved ones long term. So I hope this episode has given you some food for thought around your family system. It is not always easy to really be present in our true deep intimacy. That can be really anxiety building as well. So whether we choose a pseudo intimacy or we truly come into a genuine intimacy, either way we're still going to experience anxiety. But I think long term, a lot of the drama and the symptoms that come out in the family system will be greatly reduced by us increasing our capacity to sit in our, and our ability to challenge ourselves to really be vulnerable in genuine intimacy, rather than sometimes we just go along to get along, even though we don't agree. And that getting along, it's not genuine and it comes at a cost to us. So I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it to we're not challenging others here. We're actually challenging self to be more present, to be more open and take a risk. And if we really show ourselves and for whatever reason we do find that we don't get the feedback back that we want, that we know we're strong enough in ourselves to manage and soothe ourselves, that we're going to be okay, and that we don't have to withdraw or punish people because we didn't get the response that we want, but we're able to stay in that calm place, manage our own anxiety, and still stay connected in our family system regardless of whatever's going on. Just a little caveat to that, we are talking about reasonably healthy family systems in that regard. There are certainly systems that are extremely dysfunctional or moments of physical abuse where we do need to remove ourselves. So we're talking about general principles here, not necessarily, and ideally a fairly healthy and functional family system, not a really dysfunctional. That's a different ballgame altogether, because personal safety becomes, absolutely paramount in those environments. So again, this is about principles that relate to fairly healthy family systems in general. I would, whole other kettle of fish with really dysfunctional family systems. And in those instances, you definitely need to seek the assistance of somebody who's really trained in and really understands family system dynamics, toxic people things. If we're in family systems with narcissists or psychopaths, my deepest sympathy to you. And, you need to really seek external support to manage some of those things, and from somebody who really knows about those areas. And there are some good resources out there for those kinds of things too. So I hope this episode has given you some food for thought. Like I said, for me, this is about helping people to manage anxiety levels, to have deeper connections with others. So these are some awarenesses to help foster and develop that further. Hope you've enjoyed the episode. Thanks again if you've been watching the series from the beginning. My deepest gratitude to you. If you've just joined us, welcome. Please subscribe to the channel, Sean Healy, the Relationship Resourcing Series. I'd be very grateful. It helps the support and the reach of the program. If you want to know more about me and my services or suggest episodes in the future, you're welcome to find me at my website, emergencetraining.com.au. And then, of course, there's the podcast series on iTunes, Stitcher, and Podbean, Sean Healy Tools, which looks at a lot of the similar sort of stuff. So if you're a bit of a podcast fan, there's that available for you too. So as I say, hope you've found this to be of some value and to be somewhat thought-provoking. All the best to you in all of the relationships, in all areas of your life, and most importantly, that relationship you have with yourself. So thank you for watching. My most profound gratitude. And until we see each other again, bye for now.